This company had 1.9 billion euros sitting in the bank. Except it didn't. The money wasn't stolen, the money wasn't lost, it had never existed, not a single cent of it, and nobody noticed for years. This was one of Germany's most valuable companies, worth 24 billion euros, worth more than the Dutch bank, the oldest, biggest bank in the country. It was the pride of German technology. Pension funds owned it. Your grandmother in Munich probably owned a piece of it and didn't even know. Then, in a single week, the stock fell 98%. And then, it was gone. But this isn't a story about missing money. It's a story about two men at the top, because when it all collapsed, one of them was arrested and the other one vanished off the face of the earth. To this day, he is one of the most wanted fugitives on the planet. Reportedly hiding in Russia, and according to investigators, he wasn't just a fraudster, he was a spy. I'm going to show you how a payments company in a sleepy little Bavarian town pulled off the biggest fraud in modern German history, how the journalist who tried to expose it got investigated by the police themselves, and how the mastermind escaped on a private jet and disappeared into the world of international espionage. This is Wirecard. Welcome to Storynomics. At the top of this company sat two men who could not have been more different. Remember both of them, because by the end, one is in a cell and the other is a ghost. The first is the CEO, Markus Braun. Austrian, buttoned up. He wore a black turtleneck every single day, deliberately styled to look like Steve Jobs. He talked in grand visions about a cashless future and artificial intelligence, and he owned huge piles of the company's stock, which made him, on paper, a billionaire. The second man is the one you really need to watch, the Chief Operating Officer, a charming, mysterious Austrian named Jan Marsalek. He ran the company's operations in Asia, the part of the business that supposedly printed all the money. Hold on to that name. Marsalek is the reason this isn't just a fraud story, it's a spy thriller. Now, here's why Germany fell in love with these two. For decades the country had acquired insecurity. It built the best cars and machines on earth, but it had never produced a tech giant. There was no German Google, no German Apple, and then came Wirecard. Out of Aschheim, a town of 10,000 people outside of Munich, doing the thing that sounded like the future. Every time a card got swiped online, Wirecard took a tiny slice, millions of swipes a day, and you have a money machine. The country wanted a tech champion so badly, and Wirecard gave them one. The stock climbed and climbed, and in 2018, Wirecard did something almost unbelievable. It knocked Commerzbank, a 150-year-old bank, out of the DAX, Germany's version of the Dow, and took its place. A tech upstart had shoved a banking giant off the top table. Germany finally had its miracle. The whole country was proud. Regulators were proud. There was just one problem. A handful of people were quietly screaming that the entire thing was fake. In the way Germany treated those people, that's where the story turns genuinely dark. In London, a Financial Times journalist named Dan McCrum started pulling at a loose thread, and that thread wouldn't stop unraveling. The question was simple. Wirecard claimed enormous profits, but a massive chunk of them came from what it called third-party partners, outside companies in places like the Philippines, Singapore, and Dubai that supposedly processed payments for Wirecard and then sent the profits back. So McCrum and his team went looking for these partners, and what they found was almost funny. One partner, a company supposedly handling hundreds of millions of euros, traced back to a man running things out of a tiny shared office. Another address led to a business that didn't seem to operate at all. And then one trail led to the home of a retired sailor in the Philippines, a man who had no idea that his house was listed as the hub of a vast financial operation. The billions in profit Wirecard claimed were pouring out of Asia. The reporters could barely even find evidence the business was even real. But here's what made the story even more incredible. McCrum wasn't working alone, and he wasn't guessing. Inside Wirecard's own Asia headquarters, a young lawyer named Pav Gill had discovered his colleagues faking contracts and forging invoices. After he was pushed out, It was Gil's own mother who urged him to take the evidence to the press. He handed the Financial Times thousands of internal documents. The fraud wasn't a theory anymore. There were receipts. So the Financial Times published it, and surely the regulators came crashing down on Wirecard. But no, they did the exact opposite. Germany's financial regulator, an agency called BaFin, looked at all of this and decided the journalists were the criminals. And their theory was that Wirecard, the national champion, was the innocent victim of an attack by foreign reporters and short sellers trying to crash the price. So BaFin did two things almost unheard of for a financial watchdog. First, it banned people from betting against Wirecard's stock, actively protecting the company. And second, it filed a criminal complaint against the Financial Times journalists for suspected market manipulation. Read that again. The watchdog whose entire job it was to catch the fraud instead went after the people exposing it. And then it got darker for McCrum personally. As he closed in, he realised he was being followed through the streets of London. He was hacked. He was offered money to back off. Shadowy figures tried to feed false information to discredit him. He was named as a prime suspect in a criminal inquiry, false allegations to try and shut McCrum down. The German establishment had closed ranks around the lie. Braun went on television and called the allegations baseless, and then the stock recovered. The doubters were painted as the villains. But here's the one thing you can't fake forever. 1.9 billion euros, and it was about to be tested by the most boring weapon on earth, a financial audit. And this is where we have to talk about the auditors, the people whose entire job it was to catch this. The global firm EY had signed off on Wirecard's books for over a decade. Clean report, year after year. But here's the staggering part. For years, EY reportedly never did the one basic thing that would have blown the whole fraud open. Independently confirming with the actual banks that the money was really there. Instead, they relied on documents and information handed to them by Wirecard. One auditor at a rival firm put it bluntly, directly verifying the balances, in his words, is equivalent to day one training at audit school. The fraud survived for years, partly because the watchdogs never made the most basic phone call. Eventually, the pressure forced a special separate audit by another firm, KPMG. And KPMG came back with something devastating. They could not verify the Asian profits were real. They simply couldn't confirm that the money existed. So now, everything came down to one number. That 1.9 billion euros. About a quarter of everything the company owned, supposedly sitting safely in trustee bank accounts in the Philippines. In June 2020, EY finally went to the Philippine banks and demanded proof. The answer came back fast. The documents were forged and the accounts didn't exist. The Central Bank of Philippines later confirmed the killer detail. The money had never even entered the country. 1.9 billion euros. Not gone. It had never been there. On June 18th, Wirecard suddenly postponed its annual report. The stock started to crater, and then on June 22nd, the company admitted it. The money, in their words, probably does not exist. The shares collapsed 98% in days. The same day, its CEO Markus Braun resigns, and the next morning, on June 23rd, he was arrested. Germany's Steve Jobs, turtleneck and all, in handcuffs. On June 25th, 1 week after the first crack, Wirecard files for insolvency. A 24 billion euro company worth more than the Deutsche Bank, gone in 7 days. Germany's finance minister at the time, a man named Olaf Scholz, who'd gone on to become Chancellor, called it unparalleled in the country's entire post-war history. And the people who left holding the wreckage were ordinary investors, pension funds, and the banks that had lent Wirecard money. They were facing billions in losses. Even SoftBank, one of the world's biggest tech investors, had been drawn in and would later go after EY over the audits. The damage rippled out for years. So the CEO's in a cell. Case closed, right? Not even close. Because while every camera in Germany was pointed at Markus Braun in handcuffs, the other man, the one I told you to remember, the one who actually ran the money machine in Asia, was already gone. Jan Marsalek. In the days the scandal broke, while the world stared at Braun, Marsalek did something a white-collar suspect simply should not be able to do. He disappeared. He was fired on June 22nd, and then nothing. Reportedly, he slipped out of Austria on a private jet, crossing borders before anyone even thought to stop him. By the time investigators understood that he was the centre of the whole thing, the trail had gone cold. And then, the story stopped being about accounting at all, because investigators dug into who Jan Marsalek really was, and they found a man who made no sense as a payments executive. Reporting emerged that Marsalek had somehow gotten access to highly sensitive material, including, allegedly, the chemical formula for Novichok, the Russian military nerve agent. He was said to have boasted about secret trips into war zones. Investigators came to believe he'd spent years cultivating relationships with intelligence operatives across Europe, and the conclusion they reached was staggering. The entire time he was supposedly running a payments business, Jan Marsalek had allegedly been working as an agent for Russian intelligence. The man at the heart of Germany's biggest financial fraud wasn't just a con artist. According to investigators, he was a spy, and when his company died, the handlers got him out. Today, Jan Marsalek is believed to be living in Russia under the protection of the state. He's wanted by German and Austrian prosecutors, and he's been linked in later investigations to spy networks operating across Europe for Moscow. He ran a public company on the German stock exchange, and he turned out, allegedly, to be working for a foreign power the entire time. He is, in every sense of the word, a ghost. In Braun, he sits in a courtroom in Munich in a bomb-proof bunker built inside a prison, telling a completely different story. His defense is the entire drama of the trial, and it's brutally simple. I didn't do it. I was deceived. The real mastermind was Marsalek, and Marsalek isn't here. The CEO blames the ghost, and the ghost can't be put on the stand because no one on Earth can find him. So where does that leave everyone? Marcus Braun has been locked up since 2020. Years of his life had already gone before any final verdict. He's denied wrongdoing from day one, insisting that he was a victim of the fraud, not its author. His trial has dragged on for years and heard well over 100 witnesses on charges including commercial gang fraud, market manipulation, and falsifying the company's accounts. If convicted on the core charges, he faces up to 15 years in prison. As of the making of this video, the German courts are still grinding through it. And under that system, Marcus Braun is presumed innocent until the verdict lands. Jan Marsalek may never see the inside of a courtroom at all, shielded allegedly by one of the most powerful governments on Earth. So what's the real story of Wirecard? It was never really about missing 1.9 billion. It's about belief again, but a darker kind. A whole country, its regulators, its auditors, and its cheerleaders in the press chose to believe a flattering story over an ugly pile of facts. The warning signs were there for years. Journalists spelled it out in black and white. They even had a whistleblower with the documents in hand, and the system didn't just ignore them, it tried to arrest them, because the lie made Germany feel proud, and the truth made it feel foolish. Here's the lesson buried in the wreckage. The most dangerous fraud isn't the one that nobody sees coming, it's the one everybody is warned about, and then refuses to believe, because believing it would cost them their pride. Wirecard wasn't hidden, it was advertised, and an entire nation looked straight at the evidence and chose the fairy tale. That's the economics of a story, and that's Storynomics. So far I've shown you a founder who flew away with $1 billion in a fraud that turned into a spy thriller, but the next one is the darkest yet. A company that lied about something far more dangerous than money. It lied about blood. And real people's lives were on the line. Subscribe, and I'll see you there.